the SEC can regulate securities. That's not debatable. There's a long list of things that are considered securities, and if they don't fall into that list, there's sort of this catch-all investment contract argument of the SEC can regulate investment contracts. I think both Coinbase and Kraken continue to say, if you're going to allege that these cryptocurrencies are within your regulatory control, then you need to show there was an investment contract.
This content is brought to you by BitGo, which is one of the top crypto custodians in the crypto industry. BitGo works with many big companies and brands, such as Pantera Capital, Bitstamp, and Bitcoin IRA. Nike also selected BitGo to power its wallets for its NFTs. And BitGo has many great services, such as hot wallets, custodial wallets, self-managed cold wallets, and NFT wallets. Many institutions trust BitGo with its top-level security and incredible services, such as being able to deploy your capital while it's in custody, which includes lending, borrowing, trading, staking, DeFi access, and more. If you'd like to learn more about BitGo, please visit bitgo.com, link in the description. Welcome to the Thinking Crypto podcast, your home for cryptocurrency news and interviews. With me today is Hailey Lennon, who's a partner at Brown Rudnick and a contributor at Forbes Crypto. Hailey, great to have you back on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hailey, we were chatting before the recording. The last time we spoke was about 9-10 months ago, and the market was in a very different place. But I am glad, things have changed and we're in a great place right now, what some would call crypto summer. Bitcoin's pumping, the ETFs are live. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling great. I was thinking about that too. I looked back at the price of Bitcoin and it was 25K at the time when we talked last. And we were dealing with so much fallout, and we were dealing with continued sort of battles that the industry was having with the SEC, the fallout from all these bankruptcies. And, I tweeted a few weeks ago that I feel like nature is healing in a way. Like we have now gotten to the other side of the Bitcoin spot ETFs. And I think the industry is feeling very excited about the companies that remain, and all of the legitimate, crypto projects that are out there and what we can accomplish and what this year is going to look like.
So do you feel crypto is in its teenage years or it's becoming an adult? Because to your point, all these things that happened in the past have been resolved somewhat. Sam Bankman-Fried still has to be sentenced this month, but Wall Street is here. There is a bit more regulation. There's more better services and things that are being built. What do you feel we're at in the age of crypto?
It's a good question. I've been working in the space about 10 years, and we've definitely matured as an industry. I think that hopefully the Bitcoin and crypto industry will always sort of maintain some of its childlike aspects, just in terms of like what we're trying to change in the world and sort of questioning the status quo. But as you said, as more traditional financial institutions get into this space, we get a little bit more buttoned up. And with that comes the shakeout of anyone who's in the industry for the wrong purposes. I think that that's part of a sign of a industry maturing. We saw it even with the internet in the early days, like the bad actors that are trying to utilize a new technology and a new industry for bad purposes. I don't think anyone in the industry, working in the industry, trying to promote the industry wants those type of people still around. So I have nothing but positive sentiment towards where we're heading.
Now, you service a good amount of crypto clients. Are they feeling the same way? Or are they more positive now? The FTX and all these things are in the past?
I think so. I mean, our firm handled a lot of the bankruptcy cases, and that was very difficult. We represented the unsecured creditors in many bankruptcy cases, including BlockFi. And I worked closely on some of those cases. So sort of seeing firsthand the damage that caused, the financial harm to users and individuals who had put a lot of their life savings and trust into these companies was very difficult. I think from what I've seen with clients, the sentiment is changing. I think that people in the industry saw the Bitcoin spot ETF approval as this long battle. I mean, the first application for a spot Bitcoin ETF was 10 years ago, 2013, by the Winklevoss twins. And so, the industry likes the small wins from a regulatory perspective, because the SEC has regulated this space in such a way that it really does feel like rolling a boulder up a hill sometimes for companies to get things across the finish line or get approval or get clarity. And so I have seen clients starting to, want to engage regulators more proactively for new products. I think the bear market, vibes are gone, and a lot of these crypto companies have crypto. So when the price goes up, they have more money to spend, and they're feeling a little bit more hopeful. I personally still feel like the SEC is not done with enforcements. I think they went quiet and had a lot to focus on with this spot Bitcoin ETF approval. So, I think we take a few steps forward. We may take a step back and see some more enforcement actions, but we're moving in the right direction, and the industry is continuing to be willing to engage with regulators. So I think that's all signs of positive sentiment towards how the industry continues to evolve, especially in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great to see, like you said, the industry being proactive and engaging, but they're also, what we're seeing, fighting back on overreach, and not only with the SEC, the EIA, and whatever other agency pops its head up and says, they want to put some draconian rules or laws against crypto, right, some of it which is unlawful. What do you think about this? We got Kraken, Coinbase. You just had the Bitcoin miners and the Texas Blockchain Council sue the EIA. You got Custodia Bank suing the Fed. What are your thoughts on the industry fighting back?
Yeah, there's so many different examples. It might be worth to dig into them in detail. I mean, so when we talk about Kraken and Coinbase, they're having two very different battles, but it all rests on the same argument, right? Which is that the SEC can regulate securities. That's not debatable. There's a long list of things that are considered securities, and if they don't fall into that list, there's sort of this catch-all investment contract argument of the SEC can regulate investment contracts. I think both Coinbase and Kraken continue to say, if you're going to allege that these cryptocurrencies are within your regulatory control, then you need to show there was an investment contract. And so, Coinbase had today filed their opening brief in the Third Circuit, and they were challenging not only that, the part of SEC, you need to prove there are investment contracts. They're saying, even if there are investment contracts, you're still not even following sort of the rulemaking process of giving notice to the industry, explaining your rationale, allowing for comments. And then Kraken has also seen a big wave of support. I read a few weeks ago, they had, I think, 9 state attorney generals file an amicus brief, sort of not siding with Kraken. They were careful to say we're not choosing sides, but they were saying there needs to be evidence of an investment contract, or else you are overreaching your authority, and Congress doesn't allow that. And so I think we're starting to see, even state attorney generals or senators stepping in and being like, wait, because there is the abuse of power by a regulator can be very damaging to any industry. And so it's not something that people should be okay with.
Yeah, great points. And I think the thing that really annoys me is they're throwing a bunch of these tokens into these lawsuits against the exchanges, but they're not litigating those individual tokens directly and not giving them due process. So it's like, here's a bunch of 15 tokens. We say they're securities. Well, how? Give us the reason. Yeah. It's just
And I used to work in-house at Coinbase, and the question is, okay, you're saying these 15, so are all the other ones we list not, or are you going to come back and add additional ones later? And what makes these 15 different than the others? The industry deserves some sort of clarification on how you can have an operational crypto exchange in the US without risk, right? It's kind of a crazy stance for a regulator to take, to just say you keep business as usual and risk it. We're not going to explain why we're listing certain tokens in these complaints. The other thing that I've been sort of going in my head about is sort of the crux of the issue here is, even if the SEC could make valid arguments that these tokens are unregistered securities, what they're saying is that Coinbase and Kraken should then become registered, broker dealers and exchanges. But even if they did that, unless all those tokens then agree and go become registered securities, Coinbase and Kraken still couldn't list them. So there's this whole evolution that if the SEC would just explain both sides of it for the token issuers to understand and the exchanges to understand, then it would be a clear path forward and we wouldn't be in this kind of confusing world.
Absolutely. And then there's also like SOB 121, which Congress is trying to repeal. It got, I think, the initial approval. It has to go to the House floor to be voted on. That's another area where the SEC got called out, even by the Government Accountability Office. And I think the banks are saying like they can't custody Bitcoin ETFs or any crypto because of this rule.
Yeah, the bulletin pretty much said, if you're a company and you're custodying crypto, you need to reflect that on your internal balance sheet. And so that changes sort of the financial risk profile for a company or a bank, to where they would need to then have kind of keep an onerous amount of capital on board to help balance out that risk. And I think the argument is that bulletin was put out sort of without the SEC contacting these other prudential regulators and saying, this is kind of an accounting standard. This impacts banks. Do we really have, does the SEC really have the right to put out some notice like that? And it goes back to this issue that the industry's had all along with banks not feeling comfortable touching crypto. Whereas, even though the Bitcoin industry, we're not huge fans of the traditional banking system, right? But some people are in the United States, and that's where they would want to be able to keep their cryptocurrency and avoid something like an FTX. So there's this whole issue. And with that, it once again is that the SEC is sort of taking their own route in how they try to protect consumers, limit consumers' ability to interact with these assets, but they're doing it in a way where people are waving a flag and saying, wait, stay in your lane. There's other regulators out there, and there's Congress out there that should have a say in how this is going.
Absolutely. And, something that's really weird, and I'm sure you've seen this, Aaron Kaplan, Prometheum. I had Aaron Kaplan on the podcast, and they're treating, like, for example, Ethereum as a security. They're saying they have the broker dealer license. They're calling them digital asset securities. And then I thought, wait, where have I heard that before? And it's Gary Gensler. And it's just more confusion. And then you got into the mix, the Ethereum spot ETF. Will we see that? And how does that play into what the agency is trying to do? What are your thoughts on the ETH ETF?
Yeah, I think I've been watching it closely because, the Bitcoin spot ETF raised all these questions, right? The industry was saying, why was a futures Bitcoin ETF approved, but a spot Bitcoin ETF can't be? What is the difference in methodology, or what is the rationale in rejecting it? And the same argument can be made for the Ethereum spot ETF. Futures Ethereum ETFs were approved back in October of last year. And now there's 10 applications in front of Gary Gensler and the SEC for these Ethereum spot ETFs. I saw an interview with Gary Gensler, I think it may have been even from last week, where he still, even right after the spot Bitcoin ETF approval, he still likes to put out a lot of negative sentiment about crypto, right? It's like, he's still going back to the bankruptcies and how it's susceptible to fraud and volatile. And so for me, I've just been, at this point, I don't see any indication that the SEC is giving proactive feedback or edits are being made to these Ethereum spot ETFs the way we saw leading up to the Bitcoin ETF approval. So if I start to see sort of rumblings of edits being made and resubmissions, I think that will start to indicate that there's, all these approvals always take back and forth with the regulator and tweaking. So, as of now, I haven't seen that. I think what you pointed out earlier about Gary Gensler has kind of been unwilling to say that Ethereum's not a security, and he points to the merge to proof of stake and things that might have impacted how it's categorized. So, it's just, it's another example, though, of the SEC is unwilling to sort of communicate. I understand they can't say we have 10 in front of us, 2 are looking good. Like they can't say everything, but I think with the spot Bitcoin ETF, they inadvertently added a lot more suspense to the approval. I think the date for approval is, like, for a few of these applications for the Ethereum spot ETF is late May, I believe. So I think we'll have to kind of see how the next few months play out.
Well, I know the industry is ready to go back to court and give Gary Gensler another big loss, right?
Yeah, I mean, they'll be able to point to a lot of what they relied on for the spot Bitcoin ETF approval. And I think, the SEC has sort of opened a comment period for any individuals to submit comments on why a Ethereum spot ETF should be approved or shouldn't be. So I think we'll also start to see what comes from that. And if Gary Gensler and the SEC are ready to proactively provide some feedback on these applications, if there's any unique issues when it comes to this versus the spot Bitcoin ETF.
Now, Elizabeth Warren, we know she's been working closely with Gary Gensler, and she has her anti-crypto army. However, Super Tuesday was very interesting. Some of the candidates that are aligned to her lost, and we're seeing pro-crypto candidates are winning. So a couple of questions here. Do you see the Biden administration potentially pivoting, given that the SEC is losing in court, pro-crypto folks are winning, and there's a lot of campaign funds and a lot of people, single issue voters in the crypto industry?
Yeah. So when I think about the idea of sort of the Biden administration pivoting, I think there's different aspects of sort of the attack on crypto that they can or can't pivot from. So if you think back to, we mentioned briefly, like the energy debate about cryptocurrency, and this, the fact that the Biden administration has been trying to force Bitcoin mining companies to report their energy uses. They're worried about the pressure it's putting on the national energy grid. And even today, I read that the Biden administration's suggesting a 30% tax on Bitcoin companies, Bitcoin mining companies, for energy usage. So I think that seeing a pivot away from that would be unlikely. I think I think there's wiggle room there. The industry is working very hard to be more involved in the narrative, because a lot of the efforts by the Biden administration in the area of energy usage is based on misinformation and a misunderstanding of the industry, and just how energy works and is used, or is recycled in the industry. So all that to say, I think that there are aspects like that where a full pivot is very unlikely, but that the efforts by the industry are very important. I think probably other aspects like Elizabeth Warren's bill that would create a, FinCEN and BSA requirements on miners and validators, and even not, wallet providers. I think that is something that the Biden administration and, other senators have this, she has the support of, I think, I forget the exact number, like over double digits of senators supporting that bill. And it's worrisome, right? It adds a level, it's unfortunate because what she's suggesting would not have solved what happened with FTX, would not have solved a lot of the issues we actually see in the industry. So with all of these things, I think that any sort of pivots come from continued education by the industry and by, the government individuals that understand the intricacies of the space. And, I just hope that there can be, whether we call it a pivot or just sort of a compromise, I think there's a lot of room for compromise when it comes to the Biden administration's stance. And I do think that the industry has the ability to help with those sort of compromises and shifting the narrative a little bit.
Yeah, agreed. And I'm hoping they soften up a bit because it's been really crazy. It's been an all-out attack on the industry. But as we've been talking about, the industry is going on the offensive, and then you have like John Deaton, who of course is well known for participating in the Ripple lawsuit on behalf of XRP holders, going against her for her seat. What are your thoughts on John's run?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of John Deaton and the work he's done, and when I first heard about it, I was like, that's going to be an uphill battle, and I think it will be. But I also think she's indicated in a few ways that she actually has some concerns about that opponent specifically because, at least if I'm sitting in her shoes, I don't think that there's a way she thinks that her anti-crypto narrative is foolproof, right? There are counter arguments to many of her concerns and her bill and her efforts, right? And what are the motives behind it? And John Deaton seems like someone who will call that out pretty bluntly. I think it's great that, she's made that so much of her personality. And I think that John Deaton has a lot more to him than, just a crypto attorney and the XRP case and that sort of thing. But he has that as well. He has the ability to contradict some of those aspects. So it seems like a pretty worthy opponent for her to go against.
Yeah, she seems to be scrambling a little bit because we saw a ton of emails come out, and then she put out some tweets. If John was so irrelevant and not a worthy opponent, well, she wouldn't be paying attention. And then John is getting a lot of coverage in the local Massachusetts media. So, like you said, uphill battle, but I think he's ruffling the feathers a bit there.
Definitely. Yeah, I've seen things that I would consider mischaracterizations of John. Like from what I've seen, he says that he's a moderate Republican, while she's trying to paint him as sort of like a MAGA with other people in his back pocket. I do think that it's ruffled feathers, and I think it's good, right? I don't think that an individual like Elizabeth Warren, who does so much proactively to try to fight against this industry, and like you said, even labels herself the anti-crypto army, I don't think that should go unchecked, right? Because for a while, people might have seen all of that and thought, well, it's just crypto, those crazy people over there. But it is becoming mainstream, and it's becoming so widely adopted worldwide. And people tend to forget that the US is in very much real danger of being left behind. If we tax Bitcoin miners out of existence in the US and we make it so companies that, legitimate companies here that are offering certain types of services can no longer do that, that still exists everywhere else in the world, right? So we're not Elizabeth Warren is not shutting down Bitcoin or crypto. Would be shutting it down in the United States and continuing to set us back.
Yeah, absolutely. Well put. Final question here for you. Do crypto investors have any ability to sue the SEC for like damages if they for things they've done that are unlawful and so forth? Or is it just the companies can do that? But can people come together, some sort of crowdsource fund or I don't know, a movement? Is
It's
that
a good
possible?
question. I mean, yeah, in terms of, I mean, there are intricacies in suing a government agency, certainly. And I don't think I'd be able to get into all of them on the show. But, you know, for someone to file a lawsuit against a regulatory agency, they need to show that the regulatory agency is doing something to undermine like the charter that they were given
Mm.
and causing harm. And I certainly think there's a good argument to be made that not just companies are being harmed by some regulatory things that are happening. And so, you know, I think the industry might be in a better position to support working groups, consortiums like the Digital Chamber of Commerce and Coin Center and the Blockchain Association, and you know, considering to show support for the companies that are doing the battle. I mean, any legal process is expensive and difficult and takes a lot of coordination. So when I start to think about what that would actually look like, I do think that there's already organizations doing the hard work for all of us, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think when I see an enforcement action against a token, and it negatively impacts the price of that token, even though I don't hold that token, I think, well, that, you know, that's sort of counterintuitive to what the SEC's mission is, which is protecting investors, right? If their legal action and enforcement action against a company or a token or a protocol impacts the price of that, all of a sudden people are like, you're the one,
Yeah.
you're the one impacting the price. So yeah, it's an interesting idea.
Um, I wonder if that's possible, but yeah, like you said, the logistics of it probably going to be really hard, but it's probably better to work with the advocacy groups that you named, and that would work better. Hailey, always a pleasure. Thank you for the insightful information and thank you for joining me.
Yeah, great to catch up with you. Thanks for having me on.